Hey there, welcome to part 2 of the 6R140 valve body series. So in this video we're going to go back with the valve body, put all the valves back in. Along with all the valve trains laid out, castings all cleaned up, we have 2 separate kits on the bench that we're going to make use of in this reassembly here. So first we have the Sonnax Zip kit, and I have all of the packages, or as they refer to them, pockets, laid out in their approximate respective locations. So we have O-ring bore plugs, new accumulator assemblies, then we have our TCC limit and cooler or thermal bypass valve components from Sonnax, the O-ringed and threaded end plug for the main pressure regulator valve, and then over here we have more end plugs that take O-rings. And lastly, we have a replacement boost valve and sleeve for the torque converter clutch. So I always recommend going back with any valve body, especially more modern transmissions like clutch-to-clutch units, for example, with some sort of valve body kit. It could be Transgo's product, it could be Sonnax. I mean, you can even blend the two, or take some from one manufacturer and mix them with parts from another, as long as you know what you're doing. I would also recommend you have Essential Valve Body's oversized valve kit on the bench if they make one for the transmission you're working on. So in this case they make an entire kit consisting of multiple different valves for the 6R140. So we have a slightly oversized pressure regulator valve, an end plug. They have a forward clutch regulator valve, which we may or may not need in this transmission, converter limit, solenoid regulator, aka actuator feed limit if you're coming from the GM world, forward clutch latch valve, and TCC regulator valve, and that's that valve sitting over there on the far right side. So I'm not going to install any of these valves just yet. We're going to put the factory ones back in and see where we're at from a testing perspective. But if we need to, and we have one of these valves that are no good or not sealing, we will go ahead and install the counterpart from CVB. Alright, let me go ahead and get everything staged out of the packaging and ready to go, lubed up, and as far as O-rings. One thing that you want to be very, very mindful of, and this is going to be applicable to the upper valve body, is that you have these cutouts here. Okay, these cutouts on the inside of the bore, they can potentially be real sharp here where the casting ends. Okay, so you want to double check each one of these and eyeball them real close. Go ahead, put a finger, and just make sure that your finger is not getting caught up, because if so, it's going to cut the O-ring on the way in. Alright, you're going to put a whole bunch of assembly lube in each of these bores that take these O-ringed end plugs, but you want to make sure you check the upper valve body for any problems in those areas, any sharp or rough edges that could cut O-rings. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that before we go to the next segment. Okay, we're going to start off by lubricating the mouths, if you will, or the ports, with assembly lube, as well as all the O-rings that's already been done. And then you just take some WD-40 and squirt it into the bores. Okay, these bores are kind of truncated, so you might kind of get hung up on the step, but you want to make sure you get your nozzle all the way back in there. You don't need a ton of this stuff, but you want to coat the inside of the bore enough so that there's plenty of lubricant for each of these valves. Let me get this one again. See, like I said, it's kind of difficult to work your way back there. Alright, same with the valves themselves. The orientation for this particular row of valves is spring in first, then your valve, then your bore plug. And the bore plug is going to go inboard. So, I'm sorry, the bore plug is going to go in such a way that the O-ring is facing outboard. So like this. And then the little clippy goes in such that this side with the mouth, so to speak, will face down. Alright, let me reposition the camera just a little bit. I'm going to slide it to the right so that I have a little bit more space in here to work, and then we'll put this side in. Here are the accumulators from the factory, what originally came out, and then here are the Sonnax accumulators. As you can see, it's a spring instead of a little rubber plug. The plugs, like I mentioned, they wear out, and you'll have some drivability symptoms, some bumpy, jerky shifts. Something won't be quite right. And if that's what you're experiencing, but the symptoms aren't severe, you're not slipping, it's just a little jerky, a little bumpy, then you might consider that these accumulators need to be replaced with something like this. Alright, Sonnax does give you extra O-rings as well for all the O-ring components. So there's 4 extra O-rings for each of these plugs here, 3 extra O-rings for these plugs. I know you can't see them, but you'll see them in a little bit. And then they give you 1 extra O-ring for the pressure regulator valve bore plug. And there's one other thing that I wish they would include in this kit, and like I said, you'll see it when we get to the upper valve body and the bore plugs that go there, and you'll understand why I'm saying that once we get there. Alright, so I'm just going to install these valves. And I will flash a diagram on the screen that indicates exactly which valve is what it's called, and so that you can see for yourself. I don't have these valve trains memorized, and instead of me trying to fumble through and look at a diagram and then try and communicate that out to you, there's nothing that goes there. It's easier for me to just flash the diagram, and I'll have it up while we're doing this so that you can continuously refer back to it. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to be referring to this video to double check my work and make sure that I have all of these valves and springs in their correct location. Okay, one thing I want to point out real quick is these springs are actually color coded. I should have mentioned it while they were out, but you have alternating colors, blue and I guess silver or clear. And that will kind of help you orient toward what valve is, in what location, so that you can double check. And I know I keep wanting to put something there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install the end plug. Like I said, your O-ring is going to be outboard, so it's going to face you. And then just be real careful. Do the best you can to avoid cutting these O-rings. Alright, so end gap faces down. All right, next. All right, there's a tendency to overrun the location where it needs to stop. So Okay, all the valves are in, the bore plugs in there seated to the correct depth, and all the retainers in their correct locations. Alright, now we'll go ahead and we'll deal with the pressure regulator valve side. So you know the drill. Then we're going to put a whole bunch of assembly lube too on that O-ring there for the PRN plug. Okay, and same deal. You want to check to make sure that this is not sharp, this edge here, for the PR valve. Sorry if my hand was getting in the way. Okay, both the pressure regulator valve and this valve were dragging on their way out. I did polish the bore a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if I still have work to do. Alright. Alright, so here's the lineup for this first valve train right here. So in 2011 to 2016, which were the first 5 years of production, these things came with a thermal bypass valve. In 2017, they deleted it or eliminated it, and now they just have a blocker valve, or aluminum plug, if you will. So from the factory, you'll have your retainer here at the middle of the valve train, but then Sonnax gives you an additional retainer for their sleeve, which will go in place of the OE sleeve. So you're not really using anything in this bore other than this original factory retainer in terms of like what was in there to begin with. Alright, so alright, so here's your valve. And then all you're going to do is just stick the spring in here. And then this just goes in there like that. Just make sure it's good to go, and then we could put this stuff in there. That fits nicely in there. All right. So that's where it goes, in this channel here. All right, now your TBV blocker sleeve. So alright, now your blocker sleeve, you'll have your retainer location here, and then it'll just go in like that once it's installed. I will be needing a new left glove pretty soon. Alright, sorry for all the noise, this thing is not perfectly flat, so. Alright, next, got our valve here. That thing's under a fairly decent amount of spring tension when you're putting it in, so it may take a couple of tries. I just want to make sure it's in there. Now I'm going to test it for drag. I want to see if it's still dragging. It didn't feel like it when I went in. That feels nice and smooth. Could have been a combination of just grit in the bore and, you know, just a little bit of polishing needed. So we'll see how it tests, but for now it feels fine. Okay. Alright, so here's what I was referring to with respect to these, you know, some of these plugs that are threaded. They're threaded so that you can use a small bolt to facilitate removal. And so I happen to have such a bolt. I think this thing came in a Transgo SK6 for the C6 transmissions, I think. But it happens to be the same thread pitch as, you know, what you have here. So, like I said, it would be nice if Sonnax included these, but, you know, they didn't, so this is kind of what we have to deal with. Alright, have your retainer ready, because this thing is going to be under some serious tension. I actually went a little bit too far inboard with it. So if you go too far inboard, you're just going to have to gently pry forward on this valve, or on this plug rather. Let's see if you can get it to come back out. If not, I'm going to have to put that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the bolt in. So I guess it's this situation that you really, they really should be giving you something here. You know, this kind of situation, because this is real easy to do, as you can see. I mean, I just did it. So if I can be lazy about it. It's starting to come out, so. Oh, what a mess. Alright. Guess that wasn't needed. Alright, this is under an awful lot of spring tension. You got a big spring there. Alright, that feels nice and smooth. Alright, then you have your manual valve. And the clippy. Alright, I'll put that on later because I'm actually going to take this out. Alright, so this is mostly done. I don't like to have manual valves in when I'm doing my testing just because they're a pain when I'm trying to manipulate the valve body, you know, kind of moving it around. And there's no circuitry to test there. At least Sonnax does not have a location or a set of locations for you to test for that manual valve. Alright, let me move the upper valve body's components into the frame. Alright. So we have 5 valve trains on this side and then these 2 valve trains on that, you know, this location and this location. So here's another reason why you would want to have a bolt. And that's to install these particular O-rings. Okay, they're very tough. So what I like to do, I'll take the plug, have the bolt installed, and I can leverage that bolt to try and help me install this O-ring. And even with the bolt, as you can see, it takes a little bit of effort. Alright, get this out of the way. So these O-rings will face inboard. So the threads will face you when these bore plugs are installed. Alright, let's lube everything up. Okay, these small holes here, that's the location for your feed tubes. So you may have either a 3-pipe setup or a 2-pipe setup depending on what your application is. The 2-wheel drive with the slip yokes, they have 3 pipes. That 3rd pipe is to feed lube to the bushing in the extension housing. One of them is for the intermediate clutch feed, and then the other 2 are standard in the 4x4s as well as the 2-wheel drive with the flanged yoke. It's only the slip yoke that has the 3-pipe setup. Alright. So all these springs, I believe, are exactly the same. And they're all inboard on this side. Alright, as you feed each valve into the bore, just kind of double check it, make sure it's not dragging. You know, make sure there's no concerns. Like this one, for example, has to travel over quite a bit of lands or worm tracks to get to its final resting place, but that feels fine. Same with this one. But once it's in, you know, just push it in a whole bunch of times just to make sure that it's not binding, it's not dragging. You know, you can't feel it getting caught up. Alright, so far so good. Let's hope this last one is like the others. Let's hope I can get it into the bore. Okay, smooth side of this retainer will face out, and for the most part you will have to pry rearward, or I should say pry forward, to get tension on it. So, as you can see, it's very difficult to test valve movement. I mean, you can still do it and get it here, but I prefer to do it without the plug in the way. And if you cut one of these O-rings, it should show up on a vacuum test. But you also just want to, at the same time, be careful. There we go. And I'm picking up the damn paper towel, skewing the rest of my valves. I guess I can understand why people don't want to watch this stuff. I mean, unless you're doing it, this is probably boring as hell, or unless you're about to do it. I mean, like I said, hopefully this helps somebody at some point, somewhere, you know, at some point in the future. I mean, I guess a certain amount of folks will watch because they're interested and they want to learn, or, you know, they share the same passion I have for rebuilding transmissions, even if it's a part of the process that's not overly exciting, like tear down and inspection. But it's still good information, I suppose, especially if you're new to these units, you've not done them before, and you want to see this whole process so you can get a good idea of what's involved and what you have to do, and you know, what kind of tools and supplies you have to have on the bench with you, as well as, you know, what the risk points are. You know, I say risk points, I mean like parts of the job where the likelihood of making a procedural error is higher than otherwise. Get in there. trick with what I'm doing with this hammer is not to smack my thumb. So, you know, again, depending on, I guess, how you do something, you can kind of take on more risk than maybe you should. Alright. Get these all discombobulated. Alright, home stretch. Last 2 valve trains, and then we'll go to the vac test machine and see what kind of condition this valve body is in, what the state of affairs, and what, if any, corrective valves might be needed. Hopefully none. Hopefully it's perfectly fine. I gotta spray the valves too. Alright, no drag there, just was caught up on one of those lands or what have you. What do you know, this screwdriver is literally a hair too narrow to fully compress that spring far enough into the board. So we'll get another one. See if this is any better. Alright, both these castings are done as far as valve trains, so let's go to the Sonnax machine and test them and see how they do.